People keep asking me one question: why did I transition so late? And I think they are asking the wrong question. The question isn't why I waited. The question is, what did I know would happen if I stopped hiding? Because I didn't suddenly wake up one morning and decide to become Shalomi. There was no magical moment when everything changed. No single decision that divided my life into before and after. And it has never worked that way. My transition has been a process, a very long process. And actually, it is still happening. To understand that, you have to go much farther back than the moment I started HRT. You have to go back to the life I was trying to build before I was ready to admit what was happening inside me. For many years, I tried to solve an internal problem with an external things. I thought perhaps I could build a life strong enough to cover everything else. A relationship, a family, children, a called normal life. And for the first few years, it actually seemed to work. We had our first two children. There was a period of stability. And I tried very hard to make that life work. I tried to find within the relationship ways of organizing my reality so that I could somehow reconcile the person I was inside with the life I was living outside. That included intimacy, sexuality, the way I related to my partner, the way I tried to understand myself through that relationship. I tried different ways of making it work, and I failed again and again. And those failures didn't stay inside my own head. They affected the relationship. They affected both of us. And eventually, I had to face something incredibly painful. The relationship I had hoped would protect me from everything I couldn't face inside myself had become another source of suffering. What was supposed to be my shelter became another nightmare. And that's important to my story, because I wasn't simply refusing to be myself. I was trying everything I could think of to avoid having to face the truth about myself. I tried family, I tried relationships, I tried sexuality, I tried work, I tried changing my environment. And for a while, everything new solution seemed to work, until it didn't. Eventually, I understood that I was trying to solve an internal truth with external arrangements. And no relationship, no family, no career, no country, and no amount of pretending could make that contradiction disappear. And this is what hiding actually cost me. Because hiding isn't simply not wearing certain clothes or not saying certain things. It can destroy your life from the inside. I spent decades living with an enormous internal contradiction between who I felt I was and the person I was expected to be, and the person I was presenting to the world. And you cannot spend 50 years doing that and simply walk away without consequences. My body paid the price, my mind paid the price, my life paid the price. The excessive weight, the alcohol, the inability to walk normally. the point at which I was physically close to disability. These weren't random things that happened to me. They were consequences of enormous internal conflict that I had been carrying for years. And eventually I reached a point where I was practically trapped in my own kitchen. I was carrying about 180 kilos. Really. I was drinking far too much. I was physically deteriorating. And at the same time, someone I had considered an authority in my professional life had betrayed my trust and deceived me. I had reached the edge. I understood that I had to get myself out of the situation immediately, because continuing exactly as I was no longer an option. I had to survive, and that's when I started living. But living isn't the same as becoming free. In 2008, I made my first serious attempt to leave Poland. I went to China, and throughout a whole chain of circumstances, I ended up in Moscow. And then something happened that is very important to understand. I escaped geographical, but I hadn't escaped it myself. I fell back into my own social traps. I returned to patterns I had been trying to escape. But something had changed. I had gained a certain independence, and I could look at my life from a little more distance. Not enough, not yet, but some. Between 2008 and 2019, I was practically not living in Poland. Shanghai, Moscow, Hong Kong, different places, different environments, different lives. And yet I was carrying the same person inside me. In a strange way, I sometimes felt that I could breathe fresher air in some of the most polluted places in the world, not because they were necessarily safer, but because behind the closed doors of an apartment, away from people who knew me, I could sometimes be a little more myself. I could think, reflect, ask myself questions, imagine another life, but I wasn't ready yet. That was another stage of the process. Living wasn't the same as accepting myself. Distance wasn't the same as internal freedom. Before the pandemic, I came back to Poland. But I hadn't actually returned because I wanted to return. I was supposed to sign a contract and leave again. That was the plan. And then I became seriously ill. And before I could leave, the world became ill too. The pandemic began, and suddenly I was stuck. Not just physically. I was stuck again inside a world I had spent years trying to escape. And eventually I found myself stuck in the synagogue. And that's another part of the story. Because sometimes you can travel halfway around the world and still find yourself exactly where you started. The geography changes. The internal process doesn't. Eventually, I came to Spain. And I want to make something very clear. I didn't arrive here and suddenly become free. I didn't cross a border and think, I'm in Spain now, I'm liberated, I can finally be myself. No, I brought 50 years of hiding with me. You don't live 50 years of psychological conditioning at the airport. The external circumstances can change much faster than the person inside me. My own book is probably one of the clearest pieces of evidence of that. Even after coming to Spain, the process was still happening inside me. I was still trying to understand myself. I was still trying to understand what I wanted. And at one point, I even thought that perhaps being involved with a trans person would be enough. Maybe being close to someone who was trans would somehow resolve something inside me. It didn't. By the way, I still love you. See, that was another stage. There is another stage, and then come another and another. Today I use my own name, Shalomi. My identity is no longer something I'm trying to explain away. I identify myself clearly. I have started HRT. I'm considering SRC. And even now, I don't think of this as finish line, because there is no finish line. There was never a magical moment when I said, okay, I am trans, I'm transitioning, everything is finally perfect. That's not how it works. I'm still becoming Shalomi. And that's what becoming Shalomi means to me. Not becoming somebody is completely new. Becoming more visible. Becoming more honest. Becoming more aligned with the person who was there all along. But becoming myself didn't happen in a vacuum. I had already learned what can happen. Relationships become weapons. I experienced what it means to have your reputation damaged, to have story told about you, to have your own past used against you, to have accusations follow you along after you thought those chapters of your life were over. I was also part of a very religious community, a community where people talked about morality, about God, about values, about compassion, about forgiveness. And I experienced what happened when I stopped fitting the person they expect me to be. I don't need to tell you that every person in that community was evil. My point is what happened to me. I experienced rejection, hostility, threats, attempts to damage my reputation. And those consequences didn't simply disappear when I left. They followed me. They affected me, my professional life, my relationships, my ability to build stability, and simply my ability to live. And this is why I'm talking about this now. Because I don't want to replace one kind of hiding with another. I don't want to hide behind polite language because the truth is uncomfortable. But I also don't want to invent anything. I don't want to exaggerate. I don't want to make accusations simply because they sound dramatic. I want to tell the truth. I want to happen to me. What I experienced, what I document, what I was taught, What was done and what happened afterwards. I'm not asking you to believe everything simply because I say it. I'm going to show you what happened because I don't want my story to disappear under the carpet simply because it's more convenient for everyone else if it does. I have already lost too much. I spent decades hiding. I spent years trying to survive the consequences of that hiding. And I'm not going back. I don't know where I'll be tomorrow. I don't know what the next stage of my life will look like. But I know who I am. My name is Shalomi. And I'm still becoming. I'm not telling you the story of how I became somebody else. I'm telling you the story of how, step by step, I stopped abandoning myself. I didn't transition because I wanted attention. I didn't become visible because I wanted to destroy anybody's life. I became visible because I wanted to have my own. I don't want your world. I want my life. This is my story. And this time, I'm going to tell you it myself. This is becoming Shalomi.